Councilmember Wong, that's a very interesting question. I might pass this to our attorney, Pam Lee. I should let you know that Pam Lee is head of our housing practice group at Alshire and Winder, an equity partner with the firm, and she's here to support this project with legal advice, et cetera, or this item, I should say. Pam, if you're available.
Sure, thank you very much. I believe to answer your question, and it relates specifically to whether AB 130 applies with specific reference to the fire mitigation measures that allow a project to slide under and become exempt under CEQA, even though it's in a very high fire hazard severity zone. And I believe Powers and Associates did the analysis for CEQA, and for the fire mitigation measures with respect to the 30-foot setback requirement, there are, and I believe, fire personnel here with the assistant chief already articulated that under 1270 point, I believe, 07 or 1270.01, as well as 1276.01, allow for the setback of 30 feet to be reduced subject to meeting certain requirements related to non-combustible materials, and they listed them there. So in that sense, it's not necessarily discretionary. There are a list of standards and objectives that, if met, would allow them to have a decreased setback than what is required under the code.
So is it discretionary or is it ministerial here?
It's ministerial in that sense, because there's a list of objective standards that are met that allow them to reduce the setback requirement.
So then if it's...
And they've listed those there. And it indicates that they're including but not limited to. In that sense, it's discretionary, but the list provides objective standards by which the reduced setbacks can be achieved.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll yield back my time. Not that there's much to yield.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, sir.
Okay,
Thank you, Chief.
So I'll follow up on the fires issue. So I'll share my screen. I guess first a question. In your memo says that the approval is determined case by case. So for different cases, you will accept different alternative method for 30 foot, maybe to 20 and 10 foot, or depending on the. So what kind of things do you consider case by case?
Well, so
For
Vice
this
Mayor,
party,
that's
yeah.
correct. So we will accept anything that is provided by the applicant.
You will accept anything that provided by the applicant?
As a submission, yes. If they submit something, that doesn't mean we're going to approve it. We will accept any proposal that's coming in through an exception or an AMR process. They have to follow the format and basically identify what deficiency they are trying to mitigate against. They're going to come up with their own proposals, and at that point, that's where, for this same practical effect effort, we will be looking at the effectiveness and the perceived deficiency that exists. We'll make sure that, just like I explained earlier, we'll align that with the deficiency with the proposed setback. Once they hit a certain point where the benefits have outweighed the what is the understood and expected deficiency, they will have met that standard. The thing is that this is based on not just the code. It's not, it is based on experience and basically our engineering staff's credential and their experience as well. So there's a twofold. Is it likely to be able to still achieve the intent of the fire code? We verify that first, like I said earlier.
So
we make sure that it's in alignment. We make sure that it's in alignment and that what is proposed is going to actually solve the problem. So if it's a water problem, we look for a water solution. If it's an access problem, we look for an access solution. Sometimes it's a time problem. So something that buys us more time from an operational standpoint will actually allow us to get there sooner. This is one of the reasons that sprinklers are such an effective tool in any mitigation. So
there is no written standard that's adopted by anyone on what kind of mitigation measures would be sufficient, would have the same practical effect as 10-foot setback versus 30-foot. There is nothing written.
An example is the ones that we approved.
So the
that is an
applicant
example of
proposed a list. You kind of evaluate based on top of your head.
No, we do it the way I said we do it. And so what that means is that we have a process and we follow that process. So with that, we evaluate based on what it is. If they fall short because the mitigations are insufficient, they get rejected.
So what technical analysis do you do to decide if number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is not sufficient, you need 6 and 7? What technical analysis do you do to determine if it's sufficient or not to provide the same practical effect?
So we will take the mitigations that have been offered. We will make sure that they are in alignment and they do have an effect. If they seem sufficient, we use our experience and we use the code and we use the commentary to make sure that the intent is correct, and we make sure that that is in alignment. For example, if I have a reduction where I'm going to experience a bit of a water deficiency, one of the things that I can do is I can have the water system enhanced in some way. That's one thing. I can also increase the number of sprinklers in an area, or I can increase the spaces that a sprinkler has to be provided. So those are all effective mitigations. They all have a predictable impact. And the thing is that in this business, it's very difficult to say how much property value did I save. We can't.
So these are
can't
not
prove the things that have not
adopted
happened
measures.
Yet. I'm sorry.
These are not adopted mitigation measures. They are determined case by case based on your experience, according to what the applicant proposed.
The adopted mitigation measures are in 4290. They are part of the
Yes,
exception
but there is
definition.
no
and
adopted
that is the
mitigation
answer to the
measure
question.
for 10-foot setback. There is
For the 10-foot
none.
setback, like I said, an example of a combined mitigation plan is what was presented in that multi-phase, the two that were on the specific list, the two
Okay,
that were in
that's
addition,
fine.
the combination
Do you know what's the age of the existing homes next to the property?
I believe they were built in the 50s.
They are built in the 50s?
I believe.
So they are not built with the modern home hardening standard?
No, they are not, as far as I
Yeah,
understand.
so the 30-foot setback, one of the most important issue to require 30-foot setback by the state is to reduce structure-to-structure ignition.
Structure-to-structure
So
ignition has been the
how
focus
do
of
you
what I'm talking about.
determine that when the existing homes are built in the 50s?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
When the homes around the property was built in the 50s?
Are you talking about the homes in the neighborhood?
Yeah, in the neighborhood.
There is no evaluation of the neighboring homes or homes
So
that are a block away.
how
That is
do
not
you
in scope.
determine that the 30-foot setback, the effectiveness of provided by 30-foot setback would?
What exactly are you trying to?
I'm trying to decide based on the California code.
Yes.
The alternative method should provide same practical effect.
Okay, so
and the same practical effect should be the same as 30-foot setback, especially when you have older homes. And so I'm trying to comprehend how the proposed measures can provide the same practical effect as 30-foot setback, especially when you are in an older neighborhood.
The 30-foot setback, as specified in 4290, has the exception for a condition that does not have the 30-foot setback. Therefore, it actually
If you can
creates.
prove it has the same practical effect.
And therefore,
Yeah.
it creates the parameters for evaluating same practical effect and how to evaluate same practical effect for setback. That is found in 1276 and 1276.01. So with that, that is the objective standard. That is the standard we use. That is the way that we applied it, and that is what we did in this project.
Okay, so for example, one of the proposed mitigation measures that's on the screen right now is a fire sprinkler. So when would a fire sprinkler be triggered?
It
By
would be-
heat?
It would be triggered by heat, most likely.
By
yeah.
heat, right?
It hasn't been.
Yeah,
we
but
don't actually have
then
the plan yet.
but we know that structure-to-structure fire could be triggered by ember that may travel before the heat even reach the area.
I'm
So
glad,
how could a fire sprinkler triggered by heat have the same practical effect as 30-foot setback?
I'm glad you asked that. What we have here is we have a combination of hardening and defensible space. If you go to CAL FIRE or IBHS, you'll see that these are a system, like I said earlier. These work together. Each one of them has an increased percentage of survivability for a structure. So with that, the home hardening will take care of embers. So those wind-driven embers that are coming in, you have mesh sizes that will resist embers from getting into the structure. There's requirements for the siding of the home. This one is actually, or the homes, they're going to be fire rated to an hour, which is not required by code. There's going to be an opportunity to actually take advantage of the additional features of the home, the tempered glass, the other items that are going to be there, the Class A roof. These all work together to resist the insult of embers and direct flame. When you combine that with the Zone 0 non-combustible 5-foot zone, at that point, you don't have flames making it to the home. You don't have anything that's being driven by wind, accumulating and catching fire and taking the opportunity, because fire is an opportunistic entity. It will take
But they
hold
could
and it
get
will jump
into the
into an
neighborhood.
area, and then in those areas, even with wind blown, those areas that would catch in those covered porches, anything there will be extinguished by fire and they will be triggered by heat. So with that, there's an active component to this that will ensure that these structures will have survivability when it comes to the insult of that heat in a wildfire or a firestorm.
Okay,
That's the answer to your question, ma'am.
sharing on the screen now is a list of suggested features to include to reduce structure-to-structure ignition from the section 1276. And I think you mentioned in your memo that 2 of them are included in the alternative method, but not all of them.
If you
So
look,
how come you did not include non-combustible block walls or fences?
non-combustible block walls or
And you
fences.
did not include the hardening of landscaping, and I think not including reduction of exposed windows. Are they,
So
because from 30 to 10 feet, it's a huge reduction.
I will acknowledge that as a significant decrease. So I understand your concern. Let's get to the question. Features such as, but not limited to, very first important point. So that means anything in this list. These are suggested specifically. So of that, the ability to actually enforce or request the non-combustible block walls or fences is still one that is in our future. It is something that if it were to come to when we get to the building phase, this would be one of those things that's specified. We did not see that in a plan. It is our intent to make sure that we continue to enforce 4290 and any other standard, especially with regard to fire protection on these projects, all of them, which we do across the board. Non-combustible materials, the 5 feet, and the landscape or the hardscape landscaping is actually overlap. That hardscape landscaping is a component of the Zone 0, which is also not specified as a required item now because Board of Forestry never came down with a recommendation for it, but they are still going to be applying it to this project. The reduction of that, and then setback. So with that, what we have here is we basically have a structure that actually does have resilience. And it has much more than just about any other one in the neighborhood. This is this is something I will not deny. The homes in the neighborhood exist, but they do not have whatever wasn't actually added to them or modified. Those are components of that particular property owner. Land use and other rights are one of those things that we have to make sure that these things and our observations and our requests or our enforcement stops at the property line. So with that, the property line is 10 feet away. We actually don't have 10 foot as the zone. We have at least 14, because if you build an ADU, you have another 4 feet. With a non-combustible fence, that's a heat shield. That will also resist heat, just like as if radiation. It's time, distance, and shielding. So with that, it will also act as an essential aid in making sure that flame or heat isn't getting towards these buildings, and or if these buildings ignite, it will not be pushed out as far or hard. So with that, for those things that we could look at, we looked at them. For those things that we evaluated, we did. There were no waivers. We don't give anyone a waiver. And that's actually one of the reasons that I catch so much heat. So with that, I'm okay with that. And when it comes down to it, we try to make sure that we're always enforcing in compliance with the code. We worked with Board of Forestry, CAL FIRE. We asked for interpretations. We asked for additional information. When it comes down to it, we look for as much assistance, clarification, and support that we can from those agencies that create the legislation. And in addition to that, we also make sure that we're dealing with our own legal
I think
advice
we're out
so that
of
we're
time.
always within our authority. So we do that, and we do that consistently.